Thank you. Can I welcome to the third meeting of the Justice Subcommittee on Policing in 2014. I can please ask everyone to switch off mobile phones and other electronic devices that interfere with sound, even when they're switched to silent. With no apologies, all the members are here. With one item, which is ICT provision. I say that we could going on anticipating at the most to 2:15 because Parliament then resumes. And we have the latest response, thank you very much, from Police Scotland, dated 3rd March, on the I6 programme, and which is also on our public site. I welcome to the meeting from Police Scotland Deputy Chief Constable Neil Richardson, Chief Superintendent Alec Hipman, you're the I6 Programme Manager, and Martin Leven, ICT Director. And I now go for questions, and I've already got Graham, then I've got Kevin. Graham.
Thanks very much. Fairly simple question to begin with. I6, ultimately, who is responsible for I6? And in terms of the delivery, who drives I6 as a project?
Does it come on its own? Sorry.
It should come. Sorry, I thought you realised they come on automatically when you're at least they ought to come on automatically when you answer. Thank you.
I6 is clearly, as you are well aware, is a long-term programme of work that existed and was well underway long before Police Scotland came into being, and indeed before the Police Authority came into being. It is a collective responsibility, and it's something that's of strategic importance for all concerned. In contractual terms, the authority effectively has the ultimate responsibility. But on a practical programme delivery level, that is something that is driven through a programme board, of which I am the SRO. There is a higher escalated level of governance which takes it up to, for reporting purposes, into the SPA. Clearly, as you know, at our most recent Police Authority meeting, in fact, there was an agenda item associated with I6, and that is and will continue to be a consistent feature.
So you're the SRO, but you don't see yourself as driving it of your own account. You see a whole panoply of others also involved.
No, I'm absolutely the SRO, and I have responsibility, but I do that in a more joined-up way. So I have extended the programme board to make sure that the relevant interests and indeed picking up on good learning from the delivery of other programmes has been taken account of. We've
seen that your latest letter, you indicate that the gateway reviews haven't delivered on time, that I think of 2 gateway reviews behind. There's 2 of the sort of benchmark periods that you hope to have achieved by now. I forget the language that you used to describe them. It's on the air.
I don't know. Sorry? Yes? Right, we'll resume. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, your timetable for deliverables, you indicated that you'd hoped that 3 of the elements would be in place by now, but you've achieved 1. Can you explain why the delay and what the implications are?
I think the milestones, rather than gateways. There's a programme plan. There are a number of milestones incorporated within that. Each one of the milestones represents not just a single piece of work, but a series of pieces of work. Again, in terms of good governance and in terms of learning the lessons of both successful delivery and, more importantly, unsuccessful delivery from the past, we have adhered to a very strict approach to the delivery of activities that we require. And in consequence, what we have is effectively a position whereby complete delivery of all the elements that make up the milestones in a couple of areas has not been achieved, and as a consequence that milestone payment has not been paid. So that's in essence the reason and some of the context around it. But I wouldn't want to give any impression that because a milestone payment has not been met or achieved, that somehow represents a position where considerable work hasn't been done or there is significant progress towards the delivery of what we require. It would be wrong to say that. There has been a significant amount of work, but the stipulated completion has not been met.
In timetable terms, is the project behind time now because those milestones haven't been achieved?
It's fair to say that it is behind schedule. The exact details around that I'm not in a position to identify, simply because that work is currently being scoped and we're in negotiation right now to determine what impact that will have. However, I think the summary position is that because of the missed milestones, there is a knock-on that will move into the next phase of the work, so there will be some level of delay, yes.
And is that seen as of significant impact to the project? Is it marginal? Is it something that concerns you at this stage?
It's absolutely something that concerns us, and again, I think it would be reasonable to say that a programme of this size, scale and strategic importance is never easy. And similarly, I guess plans never go absolutely seamlessly. There are always adjustments and things that happen. And that's why tight governance arrangements are required to make sure that we're on top of that and managing it. And where something starts to go off track, that we respond accordingly. And so, in essence, it is a concern, but more of a concern is the fact that we don't continue down a particular road and allow that to start to encroach on scope or reduce the requirements that we set out when the process was agreed in the first place, or indeed allow costs to run away. So in essence, what I would propose or put forward is the fact that we are now able to identify that there is a delay and there are areas that we have not completed in a way that we thought we had at this point, is evidence of good tight grip and good tight governance. And again, what will happen with that is that once we get that planning phase recut so that we know exactly what it means, we will be in a position to report that.
Presumably the elements of those who supply the contractors, they won't be particularly comfortable with the current arrangements of withholding payments. Will that involve you in some kind of legal process thereafter? Do you estimate that at this stage?
At the moment, we are collectively focused on the delivery of the I6 requirements. What might happen, I mean, there are all kinds of possibilities, and clearly we need to make sure that as we progress, we do so in an appropriate way that's in line with the contractual arrangements that we've both agreed at the outset of this journey. So, I would expect the supplier to be protecting their position, but in turn, so must we. So I can't give any guarantees that we will not end up in some kind of dispute further down the road, but that's not my expectation.
Acting on the work currently, that work is still ongoing in a very positive fashion?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the complete focus at the moment is there's a collective understanding of the issues that have caused the slippage, and we are working constructively around trying to find the best way to recut that plan to move us forward with as little impact on the final requirement as possible. So, yeah.
You mentioned scope there in part of your response, scope being the kind of personnel management side of the system, as I understand. Is that the element that you're speaking about, or a different part?
No, when I mentioned scope, I was referring to the elements contained within I6 and what we're seeking to deliver. Scope is it's an unfortunate name, perhaps. It's a separate entity.
One of the elements of the technology going forward was that scope element that dealt with personnel and command and control element of people. It was to be prepared and ready for use in the lead up to the Commonwealth Games. I understand that that's no longer going to be deliverable in that timescale. Is that the case, and do you have a fallback position, and what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, as part of all of the change activities, we're monitoring progress very closely, as you would expect. The Commonwealth Games, everybody will be well aware, is, again, a high impact, very important event that we need to manage, and as a consequence, we want to minimise risk. What we had intended to do was move towards a single instance of scope in appropriate timelines to enable us to effectively know exactly where our people are and have a means by which to manage their deployment during and throughout the Games. It has become apparent as with the passage of time that the proximity of the Games and our completion of the work was too tight. And as a consequence presented us with significant risk. And colleagues will be very well aware of the issues that happened during the Olympic Games, where ostensibly a very similar kind of event played out, where people were there, but the ability to actually manage them through a database equivalent to scope was causing the difficulties, and we certainly don't want to find ourselves in that position as well. So for operational and practical reasons, what we've sought to do is effectively elongate the intention to move to that single instance of scope, and there is a safe workaround which perhaps Martin might want to give a little more detail on, which ostensibly gives us a position where we provide the Strathclyde network, which has the capacity and is fit enough to be able to cope with the requirements around the Games, and basically use that to give us a safe environment during the duration of the Commonwealth Games. Martin, would you want to extend on that at all?
Sure. The original finish date for the scope development was April. That's still on target for April, but we took absolute recognition of the fact that there's a lot of resources coming from out with Police Scotland that we also have to manage, that have to be put into the system, and a correct validation period for such an important piece of technology would have taken us very, very close to the start of Commonwealth Games. So it was a risk management decision to put the official rollout of scope out until the end of the Games. And leading up to the Games, we will operate from what was the Strathclyde legacy system, which has the capacity to cope with the extra resources coming into it, and any officers that are deployed from forces that were not Strathclyde previously will be registered onto the Strathclyde system. But again, this is purely for duty management purposes, so we know exactly where all the resources are through the Games, and members will be aware of the numbers of resources we're talking about in the peak days of the Games.
I'm conscious that others will want, and I'll maybe come back later on.
Bitching to get in.
Presumably that solution that you've now come up...
Ignored that.
Presumably that solution that you've come up with now is a band-aid. You'd have much preferred to deliver in scope and have the tailored solution.
I wouldn't describe it as a band-aid. I would describe it as it was always an option we were looking at all the way through as we brought the solution to nearing the validation point. It's absolutely not a band-aid. It's one of the two options we had to go forward. Do we launch prior to the Commonwealth Games? Do we launch post-Commonwealth Games?
I want to ask a question about the contract. I take the contract is, on the contract document, it's a contract between SPA and Accenture. Right. When was that signed?
28th of June, yeah.
Right, signed on the 28th of June. What's the cost at the end of it? What's the price tag on that contract for the work to be delivered?
The contract value over 10 years is £39 million.
I know it's over 10 years. Is that what's on the contract? It says over 10 years. That was
Yes.
on the end of that particular contract.
Yes.
You see, what I can't understand from a background of the legal profession is I see a line in here saying differences, that's in your letter, differences have emerged as to what the contract required the supplier to deliver, which have contributed to these delays. That's a huge contract. And that when it's drawn up, whether it's the lawyers who did it for you, whatever, this is extremely concerning that the parties contracting didn't know what they were to be delivering, which seems to me at the root of everything that's happening. Is that correct?
I mean, in essence, the issue has been a difference of perception of what the contract required of the supplier.
It's basic in a contract to say, I'm paying for this and you will do that before it's signed. particularly when you've got 46 million of public money attached to it. Yeah. How big are these differences? They must be big if we've got these delays happening, well, I think, of perception.
I mean, in essence, that's exactly what we've been working through to identify the detail around what the differences actually mean in terms of the requirements that we have set out for delivery. And in essence, what was referred to earlier on in relation to our position has been consistent all the way through. This is clearly the subject of ongoing discussion between ourselves and the supplier, and it may not be particularly helpful for those discussions to necessarily get into the detail.
Well, I mean, you know, we're here to hold the SPA and Police Scotland to account, and you know, it's been smelling fishy for quite a long time that something wasn't quite right, and to have something that's telling you you've got a contract that is deficient, quite substantially deficient. And litigation is always costly. Delays are costly. Are there penalty clauses in this contract?
The contract it's not a bespoke kind of, you know, specific contract. It is a normal public sector contract that is relatively straightforward, and as a consequence, what I don't want to do is give some kind of assessment with regard to the degree of these contractual differences. Your assessment here is that it's major and it's significant. My experience around the delivery of major programmes is that there are always kind of issues and challenges that surface once you get into implementation. It is fair to say that we had not seen these particular issues surfacing as we got into the detail, and we'd spent 18 months in competitive dialogue, which I expected would have ensured that prior to moving into delivery, no such surprises were there. However, you know, that's, as I say, exactly the kind of position we're now in, and we're working through it.
Well, is it possible for the committee to see this contract redacted, if necessary, in places of commercial confidentiality?
I can take advice on that and share.
I'd like you to do that. I think that we are being told that this is quite a serious matter as to what the contract required the supplier to deliver. I'd like to know what was actually in the contract and said would be done at certain times, and whether these defects are something that couldn't have been seen at the time the contract was drawn up. I think we've been through so many public things here, perhaps we're sitting in one of the worst examples, that to see something just extending over a period of time with delays and people not knowing what the contract actually meant they would do is very concerning. I'll move on and let others come in, but I've left you with the idea that I don't know if other members would wish to see this contract. Yeah. And I understand about redacting. I've been here before when it was the private prison at Kilmarnock. We got to see that. So maybe you take legal advice, but certainly press you on that one. Thank you. I'll take Kevin.
Thank you, Convener. You said that the contract was awarded on the 28th of June 2013. Is that correct? Yes. I understand that that you're currently undergoing what is termed as a replanning exercise, and that a contract variation agreement is currently being negotiated. Could you tell us what that replanning exercise is, first of all?
Well, exactly as the sort of name suggests, what we originally had was a delivery plan that was fairly aggressive in terms of timelines. There were certain things that had to be achieved by certain time points. As a consequence, as I say, of one or two issues, there is fair progress in line with the original plan in a high number of areas, but in some they have not been met. That has got a knock-on effect, and certain documents that are required before we can move into the subsequent stages of the plan are not yet agreed, and as a consequence there will be an impact elsewhere. That needs to be carefully looked at to make sure that the order of the work that now follows is properly structured to ensure that, again, we don't have unnecessary waste of time moving on from here. And I'll maybe ask Alec to give a little more detail in a second. But in essence, that is what I'm describing when I refer to a recut plan. And that will, I'm suggesting, have...
Can I stop you there, Mr Richardson? In terms of that replanning exercise, does that include major changes in specification?
No.
Absolutely none whatsoever.
No change in specification whatsoever.
Our requirements, of which there are 1,000 embedded in the contract, have not changed. We haven't reduced our requirements at all.
In terms of what I6 delivers, has there been any changes in what you require I6 to do?
None at all.
So this replanning exercise is all about the fact that the company seems unable to deliver in the original timelines that were set. Am I correct in saying that? Yes. So, in which case then, why is there a requirement at this moment in time for a contract variation to deal with this matter? And that contract variation, does that act in your favour and in favour of the public whose money is being spent on this, because it seems that the company is unable to fulfil the contract as it was originally signed?
I think that these are issues that we're currently working through. I think it's reasonable to say that, and the point was made earlier on, that we have learned the lessons from experience elsewhere, and we have set a direction of travel that is supported by a very robust contract, very robust diligence around 18 months of competitive dialogue, which has given us an absolute understanding of what it is we're asking the supplier to deliver. And we have not compromised and will not compromise in terms of the scope that you suggest. Moving forward from here, my expectation would be, if there are any issues that the supplier has surfaced that means that there's an additional cost or there is an issue, that would be a matter for the supplier.
Can I stop you, Mr. Richardson, again? And I'm sorry to come in at these points, but I think we need to get this clear. The supplier and yourselves have signed a contract. The supplier are unable to deliver within the timescale that was envisaged in that original contract. We now have an understanding that there's to be a contract variation agreement. The fact that they are unable to fulfil the timelines that were set out in the original contract, surely that contract variation agreement would be in favour of you guys, because the supplier is unable to do what they said they would do when they signed that contract. Am I right or am I wrong?
In summary terms, that's correct. But
I'm sorry, that's not, because you've actually said differences have emerged in what the contract required the supplier to deliver. So it isn't just that there's a delay because there wasn't agreement. The most important thing about contract is consensus in Eden, which is agreement. Both sides know what they've agreed to do, but this letter says the supplier had a difference with you about what they'd agreed to do. So there's more to it than just the suppliers in the wrong. They don't even know there's no agreement about what was to be done.
But I think, Convener, from my point of view, in terms of that contract variation, where you seem to think that there was agreed timelines and all of the rest of it, that contract variation agreement should be in you guys' favour and in that regard in the public's favour. Am I right?
That is, in essence, exactly the position we're trying to get to. I don't want to be evasive in terms of the question you're asking, but you're asking me to get into detail of issues that are not yet agreed, and they're not yet put through our governance and our own police authority for sign-off. So, in essence, I will be very happy to bring the detail of what the change actually contains and represents, but I can't do that before we've actually reached that point.
Let me change tack a little bit then. You've already said that there have been no change in specification of what the police require from Accenture. That's correct. In terms of the original specifications and timelines, were the timelines in the contract?
Yes.
Yes.
The timelines were most definitely in the contract.
Yes.
So really, what we have got at this moment in time is a supplier who has been unable to fill that contractual obligation. You haven't changed the goalposts in any way, shape or form, so you're saying here, so the contractor has failed to meet the obligations of that contract. Is that right?
We're currently in a position of negotiating with the supplier. That's a question that I think we're unable to I'm unable to answer in public just now in relation to an assertion of whether they've failed to fulfil their obligations. That's a matter that's going through a due legal process just now.
Convener, I've said before to the committee I've had dealings with IT projects in a different life in Aberdeen City Council. Now, you know, it seems to me that these are either yes or no questions. Either the contractor is meeting the contractual obligations, including timelines, which it doesn't seem to be the case, or they're not. And I cannot understand why it is that you can't tell us if they have failed in their contractual obligations or not.
Well, my simple answer to that is that it is not that straightforward. And what we are in the midst of is the delivery of an incredibly complex piece of work. What we have is, as I said previously, a very robust plan. We have robust governance arrangements. I think the security that you're looking for, I would simply say, is provided through the governance arrangements, and once the detail of the eventual agreed position is available, I'm more than happy to share that. At the moment, my view would be entering into a public debate about levels of fault is going to do nothing other than potentially compromise the delivery of this, as the supplier will almost undoubtedly seek to defend their position. And at the moment, similarly, we would have a position, and then this plays out publicly. That we're in the midst of negotiations to try and find the most sensible solution to deliver what we've set out, which is of strategic importance for not just the police service, but indeed the broader justice sector as well. And as a consequence, I just don't think that it's a sensible thing to compromise that activity.
Convener, I understand that IT contracts are often very complex, but one of the things which I've found previously is that timelines are not normally that complex, don't have that complexity. You either sign up to completing something by a certain time, or you don't. And you know, this all seems to me to be a case where you are in a position of strength, and the public is in a position of strength, but you're really unable to confirm that, which I find a little bit bizarre. Either the timelines were there, or they're not there. Either the timelines have been fulfilled, or they haven't, which they haven't. So, you know, I find this round the houses situation about we can't really say this in public. If it was a complexity round about delivery because you have changed specification or something like that, I could understand that. But I really don't get this going round the houses over something which has got to do with time and nothing else. Thank you, Convener.
Well, that was a grand finale, I think, rather than a quick. But there we are. Margaret, followed by Alison, followed by John. I may want to come back in myself if you don't pick up on certain things, but I'm sure you will. You can wait later, have an appreciation. A long haul at it.
Yeah,
Margaret.
I do have an appreciation that contracts can be complex, and I fully understand that. And I think the key to what you're saying is that issues have arisen that weren't foreseen from both sides, and therefore there is some delicate negotiation to be carried out. And I think we take that on board. Anything you can give us with the contract that we can look and understand better would therefore be appreciated. However, it would be helpful, and I've listened very carefully to what you've said. There's 5 milestones to be completed in 12, 13, 14. 3 of them were due to be completed within this financial year, I think, or by now. 1 has been. The other 2, we've got deliverable component parts that have been met. We've got other elements which haven't been achieved and certain documents not yet agreed. For example, would be really, really helpful here to understand this.
I'll invite the programme manager, perhaps, who lives and breathes the detail, to provide that.
Some examples of that would be documentation, which is crucial to the design of the solution, and also the detailed implementation plan that takes us forward in very finite detail. Because of the root cause of the issue that we're currently negotiating with the supplier, they have as yet not completed those deliverable documents to our satisfaction. So that's a couple of examples of deliverables.
Is it warranty kind of things? Is it?
It's not warranties, no. It's actually documentation which would set out the detailed design and of the actual ultimate solution that we have to be satisfied will meet our requirements. And quite clearly, we're not going to approve them until we are indeed fully satisfied that they meet our requirements.
So it's kind of design things and looking at what this is to cover and making sure that
it meets the user's needs. And absolutely. And the root cause of that is a matter that both parties are trying to work their way through just now. But our position is one of robustness, is one of strength around our requirements. We haven't changed our requirements at all, and until Accenture deliver deliverables that meet our requirements, then we quite obviously won't approve them.
Right. Okay, I'm beginning to understand that a little bit. If we move on to something else that could be or should be much more simple and easy to answer. You'll be aware there were originally 3 options put before the Scottish Police Authority, and option 1 was the retention of existing sites with the rollout of the Storm Unity software, which would have allowed the controllers to establish the location and capability of available officers outside the legacy boundaries. Option 2 involved the retention of all existing sites, but full integration through the introduction of a common suite of C3IC technology. That's common telephony management, Storm Unity, Airways, ICCS. And then the third option, which I believe was the only option put to the SPA board, was the closure of the control rooms. Did you have any input into that decision and looking at the 3 options as opposed to the 1?
So,
can I just say, before you get into that, we've got DCC Fitzpatrick next weekend about local policing and control rooms. I think that'd be more appropriate.
But it would
to
be
answered.
interesting.
Well, it's up to the panel members if they feel
it's quite a technical thing, and I would have thought your view on how these other options work would have been worthwhile.
I mean, I'll ask Martin to perhaps just give some of the detail, but it just the Police Scotland command team is a relatively small group, and so in terms of all such strategic decisions, they are taken with clear visibility across the table. So we do have an input, and these things do happen by way of discussion, and we have been working with the police authority in terms of the various sort of scenarios and the various options available. So the simple answer to that is yes, I have been involved in that, but perhaps some of the more specifics Martin might be able to elaborate on.
What was your opinion, I mean, when you were asked? When you were involved in looking at that, did you think the option to close the control rooms was the best one, or was there some value in option 1 and 2?
I mean, the simple answer to this is that across the whole change programme, there are a whole range of various possibilities, and there are various interests and various pressures that will have pros and there's cons. The bottom line, however, with regard to changing structures in the way that we have to create a national service has been done, and we consistently revisit it to ensure that what we're doing is in line with the objectives of reform. Our firm belief, and my firm belief, is that we are taking and will continue to take decisions that enable us to provide a better service, not a cheaper service or a sort of centralised service or any other service. It's a better service to the communities across Scotland, maximising the opportunities and benefits that come from a national shape and structure. And so there's no doubt that there are various possibilities that could have come forward, but moving from legacy arrangements where we had a necessity for control rooms in each of the forces as they stood, moving forward into a single organisation, it no longer makes strategic sense to deploy in that way. So it was always going to be necessary to make some considerable changes, but again, my enduring belief through an appropriate change plan supported by the appropriate technologies is that this will enable us in relatively short measure to provide a better service to the communities of Scotland.
Right, can I get back to I6 and the problems
So
with
it's
the...
still ISIC.
Well, sort of ish.
Yeah.
Can we? I've got. Can I let John and Mary, Margaret?
Yes,
now, John,
I'm
and then.
yeah.
Oh, beg your pardon. It's Alison. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here by trying to remember what the agenda is. Alison.
Thank you very much. From what I've heard so far, I haven't come to the same conclusion as Kevin Stewart that it's only about timelines. It sounds to me that there's a disagreement about the deliverables. When did it first come to light that there was a divergence of views on that particular issue?
That was within the first month after contract award.
So last year. So you've been in dispute since May 2013?
Since July,
July,
August,
sorry, July and August.
Since July, August, we've been trying to work our way through these issues.
What have there been any previous contract variations?
None.
None. Right. Okay. What dispute resolution mechanisms are within the contract?
There are standard dispute resolution mechanisms, and indeed the process that we're currently going through is the kind of, sort of early stages of that kind of standard process. And
Process yourself or Accenture?
well, that was invoked by us insofar as us notifying them that deliverables were not meeting the requirements.
And when did you formally start the dispute resolution?
That would have been during August.
It's a long time to be in dispute. You talked earlier about having used a standard sort of contract. Is that right? You said earlier that it was a standard public sector contract.
OGC model ICT contract used widely by the UK public sector.
So not a tailor-made contract for such a large piece of public procurement. The HMICS review into, I never remember the name of it, the CPMMP, Performance Management Platform, found that, the review found, and I'll quote, a shift away from an off-the-shelf specification to a more tailored solution was a significant issue. Did we not learn any lessons from that at all?
Don't learn the lessons from that, but the circumstances that we are in are entirely different. This isn't a shift in specification or requirements. We haven't changed our requirements at all, and we're holding firm to our requirements.
But you've used a standard template, a standard sort of contract.
Model contract, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to me very surprising indeed, given the history that we've had. Can I ask what the impact of not meeting the milestones, which means you're not paying the contractor at the moment, I presume that means you've got an underspend in the capital plan this year?
Well, that again was discussed with the police authority. The clear consequence of not paying the milestones is, yes, there will be an underspend. That has been taken account of already from a financial perspective, and a rephasing has taken place to ensure that the available capital is redeployed in other areas to make sure that we don't have an underspend in the way you describe. And yet, moving forward, these milestones will be complete in due course into the next financial year, and they'll be paid at that point.
Can you tell me the scale of the underspend?
Perhaps if you tell us how much you've paid out. Much has been paid out. You've made one payment.
You must know what was in the budget for this year, for this project, and what's been paid.
I don't actually have the figures in front of me just now. The milestone, the initial milestone, I believe, was in the region of £700,000. Beyond that, the other two milestones, we will, whilst they're not complete at the moment, I do expect that they will be completed and moved to payment this financial year. Alec, can you help me in terms of the...
Yeah, that's correct. £700,000 was the first milestone. That's the only money that's been paid to the supplier.
What was in the capital plan for this year in total for this project?
It would have been in the region of £8 million, I think.
8 million. Okay. And the impact of moving that 8 million into next year, you said there's a rephasing, so what will have to fall out of the capital plan for next year beyond the I6 in order to accommodate that?
It was a resequencing to bring forward projects that were in a position to be brought forward, and so I think what you're hinting at is, are there casualties as a consequence of this? Well, no, that's not the case. It was just a rephasing. So some elements are brought forward, and obviously there is a delay, which means we're pushing back in terms of the payment on I6 milestones.
Mike, convener, you can remind me, was this special ring fence money that came from the government for the I6 project?
No.
No. Okay.
John.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. Afternoon, gentlemen. You talked about it being a very complicated area, and that's certainly the case, and all of the members here are obliged to try and understand that complicated area. But of course, as you'll appreciate, that's one of a range of many, many things we have to try and get behind. So that's why sometimes we seek just simple answers, is it delayed or not, rather than explanations. And none of what we're doing seeks to compromise, rather it's to understand and support if indeed we can. In your letter, Mr Richardson, you talk about, I was unable to provide information without it having first been reported through internal governance and in particular the Scottish Police Authority. Does that remain the position?
The Police Authority met last week and I did report to them. So issues in relation to the matters that have already been raised by way of the difference of contractual perception and the likely impact on the capital programme and whatnot, but that effectively was reported to the authority at that point.
I'm trying to understand process. Would it remain your position that this committee won't hear anything unless you first reported it through the internal governance, in particular the Scottish Police Authority?
It's a matter of significance that may impact on the success of the programme, then that will be the case. If there are judgments which need to be taken and therefore supported by the police authority or the contracting authority in this programme, then it would be my duty to ensure that they are satisfied and they have. I'm acting on their interests first. And again,
I misunderstood that. You're saying if it was very significant, you would set aside that process and share that information with the committee?
No, if it has that level of import, then I need to take that through my police authority before I make it more widely known and certainly revealed in the public domain.
Well, I think, Convener, that's something we need to understand then, because if we are scrutinising this, we certainly can't be dictated to by internal governance and the timetabling of the Scottish Police Authority's meetings. Mr Richardson, are you able to say just a simple days, hours, weeks, whatever, how long is this delayed?
I'm not in a position to provide detail around that. Okay. I'm sorry.
And in relation, you talk about the size, scale and strategic importance, and clearly that was a factor with the Commonwealth Games. Now, if I noted you correctly, you said Strathclyde capacity, the Strathclyde facility is being used to provide the duty management for the Commonwealth Games. Is that correct? Yeah. And no disrespect to your legacy force, but our understanding is that it wasn't always the most advanced of IT systems, the Strathclyde system, compared to some of the others. Are there practical implications? I mean, does this help me? I'm not IT minded. Are there practical implications for policing that isn't connected with the Games as a result of this additional demand being placed on the Strathclyde system?
I'll invite Martin to provide an answer. I think part of the difficulty, and you've highlighted it yourself at the outset, there are a number of different realities, both in terms of the legacy environment. It's not true to say that everything was very poor. It was a mix, and part of the difficulty that Martin and his team are currently trying to grapple with is the fact that there was just such a diverse array of systems and applications right across the country, all doing slightly different things.
Specifically referring to Strathclyde, though, which you're...
but you alluded to the fact that it was all in a bad state of order. What I'm trying to suggest is that there's no doubt part of the Strathclyde capability was very old and very ageing, but the bit that you're referring to, it was not part of that characterisation. But Martin, perhaps you can develop it.
Yeah, I'd also just like to emphasise that there is a distinct difference between some of the elements we've been talking about here. So we've spoken about I6 and the issues with that. Command and control, or the C3 system, so control rooms, is a completely independent set of products. It's not related to I6 at this stage. And again, the scope, duty management and HR system is again not related to I6. It's an individual system. But to pick up on your point regarding our plans for a national HR duty management system, we're pulling together the combination of the 8 different HR duty management systems, which was an in-house developed system built by Tayside Police, rolled out across Scotland. We are turning that into a national solution. So we're not going to market to buy a new solution at this stage. This is a new version of the systems that are already in place right across Scotland. So The new system, the legacy Strathclyde system, the legacy Tayside system are all in essence the same sort of software we're doing. We're just tailoring it because we did have 8 different sets of terms and conditions, 8 different sets of ways of doing things in police forces. So we're just getting one national suite that will pull together all that. In terms of the Strathclyde system, has been able to cope. Absolutely. We are doing robust testing on them at the moment, and the issue with that is not a database. The issue with that will be infrastructure, i.e. we might need to put some more juice into it, we might need to get some more processors, more servers to do it, but in terms of the operational running of it, the systems are more than capable of handling that. The HR systems are, I would describe as not the prettiest in the world, but they're very, very functional. And what we are doing with the national system is putting a little bit of a facelift on it and making sure all the data works together. So, and that probably touches back on Mr Pearson's point earlier on. This has got no real operational impact on the Commonwealth Games, just using what was the Strathclyde system. It's essentially a same version of the new system that we were going to be rolling out, just the older way, just reduces the risk.
Are there any consequential impacts on operational policing, either within the Strathclyde area or out with a result of using this facility which you hadn't planned to use because there was going to be a new one for the Commonwealth Games?
There's no consequential impacts. Okay. It's, the police service across Scotland are operating very well at the moment on 8 individual systems. The fact that we are going to continue using one of these individual systems 3 months longer than we were planning to through the Commonwealth Games, it's a risk reduction exercise rather than anything else. There's no cross impact. It's a good system that's capable of running it. It doesn't change the way we're operating as a police service in any way whatsoever.
Okay, if I may just ask one question about the contract. I have others, but I'll leave them in case. Yes,
contract,
yes.
I know. You're after me this time.
Who administered the contract? I understand that the customers will have their say, and the customers are the police. Who dealt with the management of the contract?
One of the significant learning points that came from the platform that's already been raised this session was the need to ensure that there was specific expertise available, and as a consequence, when we, from the outset, started the what was then the IM journey and now I6, is we ensured that the skills requirements were appropriately and independently provided. So a professional firm of legal advisors were brought in the shape of Eversheds, and they have been the consistent providers of of legal advice throughout the competitive dialogue and into the delivery phase of the work.
So there's a client-customer relationship there that figures in this as well, then?
Yes.
And are you in dispute with your lawyers at all?
No.
Not at all.
Do you envisage being in dispute with them about the contract?
No. Sincerely hope not, no.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I think it could be that.
Go back to your letter, DCC Richardson, because we're back to this. It was to do with your milestones. The reason they're not met is because you thought you were buying something and the suppliers thought they were delivering something else, to put it in layman's terms. Because it says differences have emerged as to what the contract required the supplier to deliver, and that's why we've got the delays. Now, these are not minor differences, because you're doing a replanning exercise, and you say in the second paragraph, this is a significant exercise and detail regarding revised timescales for delivery, and any potential impact regarding costs are not yet fully understood. So whatever you think about, it's not a happy situation. And what strikes me in here is you've got a line here, it's your third paragraph on the bottom second page, robust governance of the programme has been established. Not was there, has been established, and includes management of the contract, milestones, supplier performance and delivery of the business requirements. When was that robust governance that you now refer to established?
My position on this is that I've been involved in, I've been in policing for 28 years. I've been involved as a chief officer in the delivery of ICT programmes in one shape or another for a number of years as part of legacy arrangements and now Police Scotland. I have never experienced anything that comes close to I6 in terms of structure and governance arrangements and the almost rigid sort of processes that we went through to ensure the security that everybody seeks to ensure is there is absolutely enshrined within I6. We have exposed ourselves to external assurance on a number of occasions in a number of ways. There have been 5 gateway reviews now complete, including one specifically looking at governance. We have followed all the recommendations and actioned and completed the majority of those, and we'll continue to do so.
Forgive me, it doesn't say robust governance of the programme was there from the start. It says has been established, not was established, but has been. Are you telling me there has been no change in the way robust governance, in your language, has changed as a consequence of the dispute coming to into the foray about August, just about 1 month after it was signed? Was there a change then made, and is there a continuing change? Because it's the has-been that makes me interested.
It's a use of language. I mean,
it's a very important letter, and the language is very important that you use.
Well, perhaps let me explain what I meant by that. That it would be reasonable to say that there is an evolving picture with regard to governance. We have not needed the escalation procedures up until a particular point, but we have initiated that, and we're going through that for the first time. So we are all learning, and as we go through that, we will make refinements. There is no doubt that in terms of the police authority, there's still a new authority, and they are developing their approaches and their structures. There is an evolving picture to provide at the top level, the SPA interface level of governance, and indeed there was some discussion on that very point at the last police authority meeting. But that is not the arrangements that I'm referring to here in terms of the governance of the I6 at programme level have been consistent, have been strong, and will continue to be so moving forward.
Contract level. I'm going at the contract level. What I'm trying to get at, and I'll let somebody else in this, when you find this out in August, does somebody say, wait a wee minute here, this isn't what we thought the contract was about. We've now got a fight with the Accenture about what they think they're delivering and what we thought we were contracting for. Did you then make changes to how you looked at this contract being delivered in the governance of it?
The contract is the contract, and it hasn't changed.
I know it is.
It's, from our perspective...
And it's flawed.
It's not flawed.
It must be flawed if there's a dispute. It's flawed in somebody's eyes. It's certainly flawed in Accenture's eyes, because they're saying, they're obviously not in agreement with you about what they thought they were to do.
Camilla, I really don't want to be evasive, and I very much welcome the committee's interest in these matters, but I feel I'm being drawn into a conversation which is potentially going to do damage by putting some information forward which will cause us issues in terms of the negotiations that are currently ongoing.
Well, that puts the committee in a difficult position where we have to hold Police Scotland and SPA to account in what it's doing, and you're saying to us that we can't, you're actually not wanting us to in any way challenge anything, frankly.
No, that's absolutely not what I'm saying. It's simply the case of timing. And it's enshrined within the governance. We have a programme board that includes and involves the police authority. I have a responsibility to involve them and report up to them. And at the moment, we're in the midst of sensitive discussions, the conclusions of which we've not reached. Once we reach that point where, again, the risk and the vulnerability dissipates, I am absolutely, as I'm sure the SPA would be, happy to answer any questions that the committee have.
Thanks, Convener. I think it's fair to say that you've got an unhappy committee sitting here looking at these circumstances. The elements that you can comment on, I think, in fairness, is that we met in November to discuss these issues of ICT. We've got a letter from you in January in relation to I6, and we've got another letter from you in February regarding I6. When was it going to be shared with the committee that there was this difficulty at the heart of I6? Because all the letters leave us certainly vague, and that's why we wrote to you again, because we got a letter that was full of management speak, but left us with no picture of where we were in terms of I6. Why was this not shared with us in November?
Well, I think I've tried in a subsequent letter to provide some level of explanation as
the one that we received this week.
Yeah.
It's the first indication we've got a difficulty here. Why didn't we have some insight into this matter in November?
Well, in terms of the milestones, they hadn't been breached at that point, and we were.
But you were in dispute at that time.
You've chosen to use the word dispute.
No, you used the word dispute in an earlier part of your presentation.
I'm not aware that I did, but in any event, it becomes, an issue. What I'm not wanting to do is underplay the seriousness of deviations from an initial plan. I'm trying to outline to the committee that we've got a very tight approach to ensure...
Got that. I'm asking, why wasn't it shared with us in November?
Because we were going through a process to seek to resolve certain issues which, had we been able to do that, we would have retained the original plan and things would have moved ahead. And as I suggested from the outset, in the delivery of any of these kind of programmes, you well know because you've been in my seat, that's the type of week-to-week activity that it has to be expected, and it's just part of delivery. And so if I was to escalate every time something started to deviate or there was a potential issue, then similarly we would end up just getting locked in governance and escalation processes that would take attention off the delivery of the programme.
Our concern here is that we've got £39 million worth of public investment. A previous example, which was referred to in paperwork before about management platform project, nearly £9 million was spent with nothing to show for it. And as I understand, all the bits of that system lie about in the estate somewhere, virtually unused. There's a duty on us all to be accountable for these steps. In the interests of candour, would it not have been fairer to share with this committee that there were some practical difficulties here, and you could have given us an assessment on whether or not they had significance or otherwise, but at least we would have been aware. We've sat for 6 months now completely unaware that at the heart of this project lay this difficulty.
Well, I mean, I accept your frustration with regard to that, but I go back to my original points. There has to be a process to be followed, and there has to be an escalation. My point of escalation and my duty is to report to the police authority. And once I've done that, as I've indicated, I'm very happy to provide the detail of that with yourselves.
When was it first shared with the authority then?
This has been an ongoing piece as part of the extended programme board.
So that
the Chief Executive and Accountable Officer is a member of that programme board, and we talk on a regular basis in various different fora with the police authority.
It's always been a difficulty for me in terms of governance and oversight and accountability in this new setup. You know I'm for a single force, so that's not the issue, is getting these relationships right. I find it surprising that we have you as the senior reporting officer and the person ultimately in charge, as you said at the start, yet we have an authority which allegedly is responsible for Police Scotland, and we don't seem to have any hands-on demonstrated here at committee on what is the most significant project for Police Scotland in the coming year. We're 9 months away or 10 months away from the launch of I6 according to the programme. Do you still think you'll deliver on time?
I highlighted that my expectation is that there will be some level of delay in terms of the final delivery of this.
But it says in the paperwork that you still anticipated that it would be delivered early 2015.
Well, again, you're asking me to predict things that I'm not yet in a position to be able to lock down.
That's my job, to ask you to predict these things.
I mean, where my focus and the focus of the team and the programme board is right now is to resolve the current issues and get us back on track so that we minimise the impact from the issues that we've been talking about and move towards the successful delivery.
Director IT, you've had oversight of these kind of things in a previous life, and you know where we are with this project just now. Do you anticipate it will deliver early 2015?
Again, it's way too early. One thing I'd like to emphasise, though, Mr Pearson, is the contract, and I can certainly get the impression from Mr Stewart's comments earlier on that some serious concerns over the type of contract that we've signed up to, and I'm sure redacted we can show that. A big important part of this isn't an off-the-shelf bit of software. This isn't something that we've just gone to market and said, can you give us this, it's going to do this. This is a system that is being designed based on a template, but for the unique Scottish criminal justice system, and it involves basically merging what is currently 135 different operational systems into one suite of applications. Therefore, the first phase of operation in this is high-level scoping, and the areas where we have entered into potential disagreement with the supplier have been some of the nuances around high-level scoping and then into detailed scoping. So this isn't a case where we've had significant, massive disagreement on what the end product is. At the moment, our discussions with the supplier are very much revolved around how are we going to get to do certain things and what requirement is going to do certain things. It's not just a single contract that we've put out and said we want this delivered by this date. It's an incredibly complicated piece of work. It's a massive ICT project, and at the moment we're at a stage of trying to resolve some of these disagreements. The reason that I can be absolutely confident in the governance that we've pulled through is we've spotted mistakes, and if you take a look at previous instances, for example, the performance platform and the HMIC report into that will specifically highlight out that some people miss some very big flags. This has not happened with this project. We have been all over it right from the very start. And it's an incredibly tight governance at operational level, incredibly tight governance at strategic level in the project. At the moment, we have to be honest and say we don't know the full impact until we've sorted out the discussions that we're having with the supplier at the moment.
Can I just add, Convener, sorry, just in case it's a use of language thing, Martin referred to the merger of 130 odd systems. It's actually the replacement of 130 odd systems.
I'm moving along because time's passing, so it's John, then Kevin, then Alison. John.
Thank you. I'm sorry to return Mr Richardson to the issue of process. As you'll know, I was very dissatisfied with the two previous letters, basically because I'm not sufficiently minded to try and learn some of the language that's in there, the management speak. I can't help but feel, though, if you had good news to tell us, and we wrote and asked you, that you wouldn't say, I'll tell you what, I'll need to go through the internal governance process and speak to the SPA before I can respond. And I would like an assurance from you that when the committee continues its scrutiny of this important issue on behalf of the public and the significant sums of money involved, that if a question is asked, that you'll very quickly share that information with your internal governance, whatever that means, and the police authority, and respond timeously and in more succinct terms would be helpful.
Yes.
Isn't it assurance forthcoming?
Again, I apologise for if the previous letters have missed the mark and caused upset. That clearly is regrettable, and I've I think made that point in this week's letter. It's not my intention to be evasive.
Let me just interrupt you there. This week's letter, I mean, it really was as simple as a yes or no that we were asking in that. Was the issue delayed? Now, a simple yes would have done. This isn't about trying to crucify people. This is about trying to understand the background and the significant sums of public money that are involved, and the history throughout the public sector and fairly recent terms with regard to the police with platform of difficulties. Will be nice and say difficulties with IT systems. So that's why this situation comes about.
Again, I think I've kind of laid out my position. I accept your desire, and I will, as far as I possibly can, accommodate that requirement. But again, my obligation is to make sure the police authority are involved, included, and have sight of things. I couldn't possibly have something articulated to this committee and in the newspapers before it goes to the police authority.
I want to move on, John, because I know Kevin's got to go to the Chamber first. Okay, I'll let Kevin in, because Chamber will be sitting.
Thank you, Convener. And Mr Leaven pointed out the significance of this project and how big a project it is if it's replacing 135 systems. You also said, Mr Leaven, that the difficulties were around about nuances. Now, I would have thought that a huge amount of this discussion would have taken place at a pre-tender stage, where the supplier is likely to be made aware of what the scope of the project is, what the current systems are. I realise that this is not an off-the-shelf scenario. And in some regards, you know, having looked at other pieces of work in the past, You know, I always think there should be much more rigour when they're not off the shelf. These nuances, which is always makes it sound insignificant. How significant are they actually?
There's a varying level of significance in some of them. Again, I don't particularly want to go into detail because of discussions that are going forward at the moment, but they can be simply from the way words are phrased, the way things are put in paper, which obviously if we put contractual commitments we want to make sure are nailed, to some differences in understanding in terms of the end output of what a system should actually be doing when it goes live. But again, where I'm very comfortable with this process and where we are and very comfortable with the contract is we built in timelines, and the timeline payments that have not been given so far are at the end of scoping periods. If we're not happy with the scope, we're not paying the cash for that scope at that stage, and that's where the incredible amount of governance that has been put into the project is, I'm not going to say paying off, but is absolutely showing benefits at the moment. So we are able to intercept potential problems with the development of the system at a very early stage rather than find out about them 2 or 3 years down the line.
I think the strictness about not paying when the thing hasn't been delivered gives me some consolation, because I've seen, Convener, in the past payment being made and things not being delivered right. My final question, Convener. We've had quite a lengthy discussion about this over the piece this afternoon. Obviously, we're not the contract holder, that's the SPA, and they must deal with some of this too, and I'm sure that we'll likely speak to them. But could we have assurances that the delay in this project is not going to have any effect on frontline policing, service delivery and community safety?
This programme of work is all about enhancing that. So you could characterise this in terms of a delay means that the benefits don't come on stream as soon as we would hope, and therefore, depending how you want to characterise the answer, there will and there should be no impact on what is currently happening on a day-to-day basis, but we're seeking to improve that. And clearly any delay is going to push that back, and we would want to minimise that.
We're not seeing a backward step. We're seeing service delivery go on, a delay in the improvement that we would all like to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Do you want to leave now? It's fine if you want to get off. Alison, followed by John.
Thank you.
And I'm going to stop it. I have to stop at 2:15.
Okay.
2:30, all right.
Whose signature is on the contract on behalf of the SPA? Who actually signed off the contract?
The initial contract was signed by the Chief Constable, which, again, that was just for convenience, I guess, more than anything else. But the contracting authority remains the SPA.
Has the turmoil and the kind of upheaval that there was in the SPA last year, where it changed direction and it had took a different kind of approach to its management, has that had any impact on the oversight of this contract? And do you think it has contributed to it in any way?
It's not in my view, no.
So, with the changes in chief executives and the changes in the management structure, you don't think anybody took their eye off the ball at any point?
No, I mean,
no.
I don't think that would be a fair...
Okay, that's fine.
Margaret. Oh, sorry, John, then Margaret.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm wondering about the system when it is in place and up and running and hopefully running well, its ability to evolve, because clearly laws change. And in particular, if I can ask regarding where the passage of the Criminal Justice Bill, were it to go ahead, where we move from a situation of detention and arrest to simply arrest, and the names escape me at the moment, but the system whereby the investigative liberation for people in custody, and there'd be issues around that. Also, the issues falling out of the Victims Bill regarding notification to victims and liaison with the Crown Office, Procurator, Fiscal Service. Now, these presumably follow the signing of the initial contract. Is there capacity to include these, absorb these in the new system?
I'll invite Alec to give you some detail, because he's been heavily immersed in some of the criminal justice discussions around this. But I guess from my point of view, just on a more general level, the Criminal Justice Bill in particular has obviously been building for some considerable time. That was built in at a very early stage. We were aware of it. Alec and the team put arrangements in place to make sure we properly understood what the implications would be. And I think, if my memory serves me right, there were 18 adjustments to the scope to cater for the likely impact of the bill moving forward. In addition to that, in a more general sense, the entire way the I6 structure has been created enables maximum flexibility moving forward. You can't know what you don't know, but we do want to ensure that as we move forward, if new practices or new IT possibilities become available and affordable, we would want to be able to ensure that they are as compatible as we can possibly and reasonably make them at this stage of the game. And so that has been part of the base thinking of I6. So as far as possible, we have made sure that it would be compatible with partners, with mobile data, if that comes on, etc., etc. But perhaps specifically around the Criminal Justice Bill, you maybe just...
There are in excess of 18 requirements as a result of us working closely with the project teams who were tracking the Callaway review in its earlier stages and then moving towards the bill. We tracked that so we could fold in and future-proof the certain functionality that we would need to discharge a lot of those new operational processes and procedures. So they've already been embedded in our requirements and in the contractor solution as well to enable that. The same also applies to certain elements of the Victim and Witness Act and the Children and Young Persons Bill as well. I won't go into the micro detail of the functionality, but I can certainly provide some reassurance that we've tracked that all the way through, and at the moment we think we've got most of the requirements covered.
Thank you, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah. More specifically, would the abolition or the retention of corroboration have any meaningful impact on the system?
You're a delight, Mark. Like her style. It's not helpful, but it's like her style.
I can actually say, to be blunt, the outcome of that will have no impact on the I6 programme, the functionality at all, because quite literally it's about recording a data field referring to a corroborating officer, and that will remain, or a corroborating witness, that will remain, because if there are corroborating witnesses available that need to be recorded in a report we send to the fiscal or the court, then we'll still do that. So whether it's abolished or not, the data fields will remain there to be populated if required.
So it would only be time, really, that we're talking about, not anything to do with the system. Can I ask to what extent the I6 system will link up with other IT systems, and whether there are any systems which would not be compatible with such a link-up?
One of the technical requirements for the I6 programme is that the solution has to be agile, and its approach to integration, and I won't go techie because I'm not a techie and I know members wouldn't enjoy that either, but it's basically a kind of agile integration piece with any other kind of IT product, which is far more slick and efficient and more of a plug-and-play approach than we've been used to in the past, which has been kind of a lot more technically kind of constrained, for want of a better expression. We do have an integration piece with a number of significant other national IT systems. That's part of the contract, and also those of our partners. Since actually the early stages of the procurement journey, we formed an I6 criminal justice partnership group with the senior business change leads for example, the Crown Office, Fiscal Service, Court Service, Prison Service and the like, and they keep us, again, aware of developments in their own area. And I know it was a question that was asked, I think, indeed by the convener recently around the integration piece with the Crown Office and Fiscal Service and courts. That clearly is a key element of it. And just finally, the future-proofing element of that is clearly because we know the direction of travel we're taking in with our criminal justice partners in terms of an ongoing and maturing justice digital strategy is going to likely move towards greater exchange of electronic documents and the like. And again, we have all that covered in the requirements and in the contract.
Okay.
I want to ask back to your letter, DC Richardson, very helpful letter. You say in the penultimate paragraph about this replanning exercise, and you say in the last, this is a significant exercise and detail regarding revised timescales for delivery and any potential impact regarding costs are not yet fully understood, which I've reprised before. It's anticipated this information will be reported to the Police Scotland I6 Programme Board and Scottish Police Authority by the end of this month. I would hope that, first an assurance, because we've had assurances before in a different place in the Justice Committee, that things would be done by the end of a month, and it was 3 or 4 months afterwards, and it's a bit of elasticity. Is that fixed? March, the end of this month, and that the committee will also have that information by when?
What is fixed is the date for the programme board, which I think is the 25th of March.
And that?
Which is what we have...
Which is, sorry I interrupt you, which date is that? It's the
25th?
Of March?
Yeah.
So, when would the committee have the privilege of this information?
Well, my expectation would be we would have the plan agreed, approved, if we are able to do that on the 25th of March. I would then notify the police authority and advise them of that outcome, and thereafter that would be a matter that I'd be happy to share with the committee.
How long? I'm trying to get, when we meet, we'd like to know how long, within days? Of the agreement, if it's gone through your systems, how soon to this committee?
It's really as long as it can. It takes me to get an appropriate audience with the police authority. And
I'm sure you have access, DCC Richardson. So can you give us an idea within a week or something? We don't want to wait another month.
Well, similarly, in terms of moving this forward, the authority have also expressed a desire to make sure that they're advised as soon as reasonably possible. So I would be expecting within a week, 2, depending on, I don't know, other diary commitments, of that date, they would be advised, and thereafter I'd be able to share it with the committee.
Yes, I'm advised our next meeting is the 26th of March. So SPA meeting, I beg your pardon, is the 26th of March. When do we next meet? Well, it won't be by then, so it'll be the 3rd of April we next meet. It'd be handy to have it by then. Just that's a milestone for us, if you'll forgive me. I'm just putting it on the record. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm just saying we meet on the 3rd of April. Quite handy for us to have that information for that meeting. Sorry?
I was just wondering, are the authority not represented on the I6 board?
The I6 board is the chief executive and accountable officer, but we don't have a member. And in fact, this is one of the issues that we did seek independent advice on, and the Gateway made reference to it. And their clear guidance was that that is not a desirable state of play. In fact, the authority are there to scrutinise and oversee. They're not there to be part of the decision-making environment. So there is specific guidance and a recommendation along those lines within the Gateway report that the authority have.
The authority pays attention to this committee, we hope. Graham, last question.
You'll be pleased that this isn't an IT question, and I'm sure you're delighted you wrote that letter this week. It's been an interesting couple of hours. My question harps back to the last evidence session that we had with the Federation, the Superintendents Association and the Civilian Staff Association. When I6 was presented to committee, if I remember properly, the savings and the benefits that were to be accrued within the heart of I6 was about changing the way in which police officers behaved and operated out there in the street. And I asked the 3 members of the panel last time round, have they got a grip of the vision of that for the future? What changes will take place? And I hark back to this thing, we're within about 9 months of I6 coming on stream if it delivers on time. We didn't get any fulsome response about the changes that will come along. Now, that seemed to be the heart of the savings that you indicated to us a year ago. Is that work ongoing? Can you share any view of what changes will take place which will make life better for the public, more effective for the service and more efficient in cash terms?
I'm not sure if I necessarily fully understand your question. I mean, at the basis...
Let me say it again then, rather than you go off a tangent.
Please, because,
I was aware that his head would be full of IT. That's why I thought I'd give him time to think about it. What
you
was said
don't
to
have
us,
flannel. Just make a short
what
question.
was said to us right at the outset was, this isn't an IT project per se. It's about making police officers work more effectively and more efficiently. When I asked the panel last time round, has that work been done and do they now see what the future is, I think there was a rather blank stare back. So someone somewhere in the system hopefully has that picture. Is it you?
There's two strands to this. One is the level of awareness and knowledge that the staff associations have and the level of integration. I'll ask Alec to touch on that in a second. The second part is the work around what kind of difference this is going to make to the working life of cops and staff moving forward into the brave new world. Well, absolutely, but in essence, the people that are going to be the immediate beneficiaries are officers who, at the moment, have to go in as part of their duty and populate numerous systems, both ICT and paper-based, in order to get through an arrest or a process of some description, that will now be able to do that in a far shorter time period and in a slicker way, which frankly minimises mistakes, etc., etc. That work has effectively, during 18 months of dialogue, been worked through with literally hundreds of members of the organisation who do this on a daily basis, understand their business, and we have built up the requirements around their input. And so there is, I would suggest, a very widespread understanding of the potential and what we are seeking to deliver. But perhaps, Alec, just in terms of the more formal engagement with the staff associations, can you touch on that?
Formal engagement commenced just immediately after contract awards through JNCC with the unions. Sorry, yeah.
I'm really not interested in engagement.
I don't think.
What difference will it make? When we go into the service in a year's time, what's going to knock us back on our heels and say, this £39 million, we've got value for money? What do we see that's going to be different?
Across a whole range of policing activities, in terms of obviously creating a national modern IT solution that supports how we investigate crime, protect vulnerable persons, investigate missing persons, share information with our key partners, keeping cops away from the back office and in their actual workplace, which is the community and not the police office, so they can continue to be visible and more effective.
And how will the public see the difference? What will they see?
Well, I'd like to think it will make a significant contribution towards the continued drive to reducing crime.
Can we stop on that?
I'm happy with that.
I think we're a bit battle-weary, panel and indeed the committee. Can I thank you very much for your evidence? That's ended this session. I say to the members, our next meeting is the 20th of March, and we'll take evidence from Deputy Chief Constable Rose Fitzpatrick in relation to the evidence we've gathered through our calls for views and visits on local policing, when you can raise the questions you raised so cleverly each week. Thank you very much. That ends the session.